Paul would have really had it good if he had had this kind of set up at Mars Hill, wouldn't he? But I understand that those that have stood at Mars Hill, which I've never done, are able to talk way back up, and people way back up at the top of the amphitheater are able to hear him. So modern technology is still trying to catch up with them. I want to start by telling you I'm so grateful for the involvement that you have now been in with me in the work in India and various other places as well. But basically, the focus that your funds are used for is for the Kakinada School of Preaching. And I was trying to remember exactly what year it was that you came on board. I'm thinking it was about 12 years ago. My first trip into India was in 2003, and it wasn't long after that you started helping in the work with particular emphasis upon the Kakinada School of Preaching. I want to tell you a little bit about Kakinada, a little bit about the work in India, a little bit about the work in various other places that I'm engaged in. One of the basic changes that I experienced in my lifetime in the last 2 years is I got married again to the former April Meacham. And April is she's a wonderful worker in the kingdom. We've known each other for maybe 30, 35 years. Her husband died in the year 2017, and then my wife passed away in 2019, and then we were married April the 15th, 2022. Some of the mission work that I'm involved in, we're now residing in Montgomery, Alabama, where we worship, and she has been a member there much longer than I have. Frank Chesser is the preacher in Montgomery, but some of the works that I am involved in, I conduct gospel meetings, 2 or 3 gospel meetings a year at invitation. I also attend various lectureships, and she and I both are invited to speak on a number of these lectureships. There's also a Bible class teachers workshop that she's involved in. She and her business partner, who is Tia McWhorter, have been doing these Bible class teacher workshops for maybe 25, 26 years now. And if you've never had her here, you need to have her come because she and Tia teach the ladies how to teach younger children. And they have a wide array of lessons and material that you can tap into. This particular picture was actually at a Bible class workshop they did in Panama. And it went international at this particular time. I'll tell you a little bit more about that when we get into some of the work that I'm doing. I'm also still involved in my writing. I am presently working on 1st and 2nd Timothy and Titus. I hope to be sending that to the printer by the end of August. And one of the benefits of marrying April was that she and Tia own a bookstore. And so they can take care of all the sales of my books now and taxes, and I don't have to get a business license living in Alabama. Basically, the focus of this report is going to be on the work in India. I'll tell you a little bit about that. But in the last several years, I have made a number of trips to Mexico, to the Philippines, to Costa Rica, and to Panama. And since I've had some difficulty getting into India, I've turned my attention to areas that I can get into, and I'll tell you a little bit about some of the work as we go along. I made a trip to the Philippines 1 year and 3 months ago, and I'm scheduled to go back again January of this year. Manila is on the larger island, and if you move in to the island in the area of Manila, you're going to see Quezon City and several other cities around that. I actually did the work when I went there in Quezon City, and then I went to Malapi, and then I went up to Angeles. And I'll tell you a little bit about each one of those. Angeles is further to the north and is typically known for it being the home of Andrews Air Force Base until that was shut down in the late 1990s. Quezon City, as I'm standing in my apartment, just to give you an idea of how big the Manila, Quezon City, Malapi, all of those just blended together in one huge metroplex. This is looking out to the east as the sun was setting. That's looking to the north out of another window. That's looking out of the south to another window. And so you get a wide array of how large the city and area is in Manila. It's a very modern country. They have a lot of great American amenities. I love Krispy Kreme donuts, so that's going to keep me going back from time to time. But I was surprised at how modernized the nation of the Philippines is. In fact, all up and down the highways to the various cities as well. They are a country that is mostly Catholic in their religion, though they do have some Eastern religions as well. I'm not real sure what this represents. I'm prone to think it represents some kind of a Buddhist group. But this is a school of wisdom, and as I passed by, I thought about Paul's writings in 1 Corinthians chapter 2, 1 and 2, when he talked about the wisdom of the world versus the wisdom that God has to give. Brother John Diamante is the local preacher there. John is a graduate of Memphis School of Preaching in the year 2013, I think it was, or 2010, somewhere in that neighborhood. And over to the right, you see that he is remodeling the house that he has there in Quezon City. And they are building facilities on the top floor for the church and Bible classes. And while I was there, I conducted a series of lessons on leadership. In fact, I spent 3 days, got in there on Friday, taught Saturday and late Friday night, Saturday and Sunday there in Quezon City. And we had a series of lessons on leadership, had some great men in the congregation, some who are getting very near to being able to serve as elders. This gentleman on the left is one of the older members there. He was raised in the church. He is a very good candidate for becoming an elder. And then there were 2 other men who are going to serve with him. So the church in the Philippines is basically making a lot of progress, and it is wide open for preaching and teaching. You don't need a visa to go into the Philippines. You just go in and you can teach and stay there as long as you want, and then do what you can to advance the cause of Christ. The second half of the week, starting on Monday, I went to a place called Malate. That's in the center of the Metroplex, sort of south and east of Quezon City. And this was the group that met on, I think it was Tuesday while I was there. And the gentleman in the blue shirt, his name is John. He was a graduate of the old Metro Manila School of Preaching. It's no longer in operation, but it provided a number of preachers in that particular area. You're still seeing here the group that came on Saturday, and like I did in Quezon City, I presented several lessons on leadership here in Malate, and we would have time for lectures and then have time for questions and answers. And we did that for 3 days, and then on the next Sunday morning met with the whole congregation. And so it's a sizable congregation. It is self-supporting, and it continues to advance the wonderful cause of Christ. I have to tell you about jeepneys in the Philippines. If you've ever been to the Philippines, particularly in the large cities, you'll see these renovated Jeeps. And when America left the Philippines after World War II, they literally left tens of thousands of Jeeps. And these were bought up by entrepreneurs, and they turned them into taxis, or people movers, if you will. And they put a bed on the back of these jeepneys, extended bed, and you can get on this. You can sit on one row on this side or one row on this side, and you exit through the back. And as you're traveling down the road, a jeepney only goes up and down one street. But if you get to an intersection and you want to change places, you just beat on the top. They stop and let you out, and you catch another jeepney. Well, I got the courage to ride one of these, and we went up and down the streets of Manila for a short while, and I understood after riding in that thing why they say don't take the jeepney for your transportation. But it was a Sunday, didn't have to worry about much traffic. From Malate, I traveled up the highway. You'll notice the highway extending off to the left. That basically runs up to the city of Angeles. And Angeles is the old area where the Andrews or Clark Air Force Base, one of the old Air Force bases. And that area, interestingly enough, has been changed into a huge financial center. And things up in that neck of the woods are very modern. They're very up to date. Salaries are a little bit higher, and there's at least one congregation there in Angeles, and then there's another one outside the actual city, and that was the church at Dumarlacot. I think I'm pronouncing that right. It's a congregation of about 27, 28. The gentleman on the far right is actually a business entrepreneur. And he purchased the property for the building. He's in the process of remodeling it. And he and his family do a great job of keeping the church active. This young boy is one of his sons. He has 4 sons, all of whom are faithful Christians. This is his youngest boy, leading singing. They speak English. They sing in English. They preach in English. So I didn't have to have an interpreter at this. And so the congregation there is strong, it's advancing, it's self-supported. And when I got ready to say goodbye, they gave me this nice chocolate cake, and I told them, unfortunately, I can't take that with me, but bid them farewell. I'm going to tell you a little bit about the work in India now. This basically is the work that you're involved in, and all of your funds are basically used to help with the Kakinada School of Preaching. I've told you before about the population figures in India, but it's staggering how rapidly they are growing, even with the COVID epidemic that took several thousand lives. In 2004, when I started this work, the population in India was 1,130,127,000. And then after 10 years worth of work, let's see if I get this doesn't want to go forward. What am I doing wrong on this? Is the battery run down? There we go. The population in 2010, which was 6 years later, was 1,234,413,000. And as of April 15th this year, the population in India is 1,438,840,863. They have now surpassed China as the most populated country in the world. And you've got to realize that the land mass in India is about a third of China. So you're talking about very crowded conditions, and fortunately we can still get in some cases, and we still have people who are going there, but even though we're not always able to go, some of the brethren there can still carry on the work. This is Narendra Modi. He is presently the Prime Minister in India, and I've shared with you in my report some of the difficulties we've had in the last several years. He is of the Hindu Nationalist Party. He came to power in 2020. He's a strong socialist. He's vowed to eradicate Christianity in India, and he has also vowed to eradicate Islam in India. And they have passed numerous laws affecting how we can get funds into India. Now, they have sort of backtracked. When he first became Prime Minister, they immediately passed a law that said no foreign funds were to be sent for religious purposes that had to do with Christianity. Flat law. Well, that affected the Mother Teresa Foundation, which brings into India more than $15 billion a year in income and revenue. So they immediately backtracked on that, and they said, okay, we will allow religious institutions that have been here more than 20 years to fill out paperwork, and they will still be able to receive funds. So they approved the papers for Mother Teresa, but they, with regard to the churches of Christ, and particularly as it affects us, they said you have to do the paperwork, You have to get it turned in within 90 days, and if you don't get it turned in and processed by the government within 90 days, you have to start all over again. Nehemiah got his paperwork in within 1 week's time, and they just sort of sat on it until the 90 days was over, and then they said, you've got to start over again. So we started over again, same thing. 90 days later, they said, you got to start over again. That's been going on now for a little more than 2.5 years. I do not believe they ever intend to approve his paperwork and allow us to send funds to him to operate the school. One of the tragic side effects of this is that we had been sending funds into the school when this first hit. And there are about $30,000 to $40,000 worth of funds tied up in the bank at New Delhi. And I'm not confident that these are ever going to be released. So we keep them in our prayers that those funds will be released and he'll be able to use those for effective purposes. So he has vowed that he's going to eradicate Christianity. I wonder how it's going to look in about another 10 years as God starts in his great providence dealing with some of the things. I'll tell you a little bit about the work that we're doing. Let me see how this is looking up here. Before these laws were passed, we would receive funds for the KSP, Kakinada School of Preaching, and we would take those funds and we would deposit them in the Forest Hill Congregation Mission Fund. And then out of that, I would either write a check or I would wire funds to the school account. And we had no problems with that for probably 15 years that I've been doing work with Nehemiah. But now what we're having to do is we receive the funds. These funds are then deposited into the Forest Hill congregation, and then a personal check is written to me, and those funds are deposited into my account. And then I, in turn, have to either wire or write a check to Nehemiah in his personal account, and then he takes those funds and he deposits them in the school account. Now, the end result is the same. And Nehemiah and I have been praying diligently that the Indian government won't catch on to what's taking place. But if they do, we'll find another way to get funds to Nehemiah. So at least right now, with this capability of sending funds to individuals instead of to religious organizations, we're able to keep the funds flowing to Nehemiah to help run the school, but also to help pay the preachers out in the various villages that we support and the 3 orphan homes that we support as well. So let me tell you a little bit about the work in India as it's progressing. This is a picture of the school. We're training men in 3 different languages, which is Hindi, Telugu, and Orissa. Now, you've got to remember, we've got 7 teachers, including Nehemiah, that teach 3 languages. So that simply means that there are 6 teachers, other than Nehemiah, that teach. 2 of them teach all the courses for Hindi, 2 of them teach all the courses for Telugu, and 2 of them teach all the courses for Orissa. So Scott, try to imagine when you attended Brown Trail, you had 2 men who taught all of your classes first and second year. So they have a very heavy load. But at the same time, these men are engaged in doing local work. Each one of the professors in the school preaches to at least 1 congregation, in most cases 2 congregations. Now, the school right now, this picture is about maybe 12 years old, 14 years old. And right now, the school is in need of some desperate repairs. They have a problem with their roof because of various monsoon seasons that have eaten away at the concrete. It's gotten down into the rebar that the concrete is set in the center of the concrete. So basically, they have to tear the whole of that roof off and relay that roof. So we're trying to raise about $30,000 to accomplish this. We have about $10,000 that has been contributed, so we're about 33% of the way there. And if you would like to contribute to that, I'll tell you who you can send the funds to as we bring this to a close. Let me show you a picture. This is the most recent picture. This is about maybe 4 months old. The gentleman you see seated right over here, Brother Jed Hyder, as an American citizen. He works for, it's either Mobil or Exxon. I can't remember what oil company he works for. And they sent him to Bangalore to do some work in India. So he took a weekend off, a Thursday, Friday, and a Saturday and a Sunday, and he flew over to the Eastern Seaboard to meet Nehemiah and walk through the school and see what the needs were. And he sent me some videos that he made. They're not professional videos, but they are good. And you can go to my website, which is Tom Wacaster at Tom's Pen Online, or it's Tom's Pen Online. Anyway, I'll give you a card, but you can go to my website and watch that video. It's not professional, but makes me homesick sometimes watching that video. The gentleman immediately to his right is Brother Nehemiah Goodham. Nehemiah has been the director of the school for almost 50 years now, and Nehemiah is approaching 83, so his health is starting to slow down. And in the last few emails that I've had with him, we are corresponding as to how we're going to pass the mantle of leadership to the next generation. So I want you to earnestly pray for that, because the big challenge that we have in that is finding men who are qualified, that we feel are qualified. We have a couple in mind. One of these is one of the teachers, the staff here, who has been with the school for more than 20 years. He's actually got a degree in engineering, but he himself attended Kakinada School of Preaching, and then he's attended some other schools as well to learn things like Greek and Hebrew. And so he's an ideal candidate. But keep this in your prayers, because that kind of change always leads to some challenges. The ladies standing behind them are their wives, and some of them are their children. And I've known all except for one of these teachers. I've known all of them for 12, 14 years. I long to go back to India, particularly as we try to deal with this transference of leadership in the congregation. But I have applied 4 times now to get a visa, and they've denied me every time. And I think it's because I'm associated with Nehemiah. It's the largest school in India. It's the oldest school in India. And the Indian government has a lot of records of their operation. And they have given Nehemiah some problems now and then. They presently have 60 student enrollment. Nehemiah Goodham is the director since 1974. There are 6 teachers teaching in 4 languages. But some of them also teach in English, but basically the free Indian language. We have 2 full-time cooks who are supported by our Widows Fund. They live on campus. They cook for the students. And so the school continues to operate. They're just doing some great work. Some of the needs, we need some building repairs. The staff is desperately needing some raises. I gave the staff a raise maybe 5 years ago, but they're suffering the same ravages of inflation that you and I are suffering. In some areas, even worse. So we want to try to raise their salary about $25 to $50 a month. Travel, we need travel and work funds for Brother Goodham to promote the school and recruit. Let me just share with you, since I put this slide presentation together, share with you a couple of emails that I have received from Nehemiah this past week. He has made a mission trip in the last couple of weeks to Bangalore, and then up to Hyderabad, and then he's going over to Visakhapatnam on the East Coast. And while he was in Bangalore, he met with 12 denominational preachers, of whom 8 of those were baptized. And most of the time, when we baptize a preacher in a denomination, the largest number of the members come with him. They'll baptize them as well. So Nehemiah still continues to work. He travels extensively. One of the needs that he's going to be facing probably within 4 or 5 years is the need for an automobile. He probably puts anywhere from 60 to 100,000 miles on a vehicle every year. So his vehicles last about 4 to 5 years, and that's about it. So we're going to be raising funds for that as well. These are some of the preachers who have graduated from the school. The gentleman on the far right who is missing his left arm, Brother Philip, when he graduated from the Kakinada School of Preaching, he was sent to Gunter, this city here, to try to revive the church that had been started about 6 years earlier. There were something like 6 or 7 members. He started getting them to meeting. He started evangelizing. He grew that congregation till it became self-supporting. And in the meantime, he has started 3 more congregations in Gunter and 23 congregations in the villages surrounding Gunter. And this is a man who is living on about $200 a month in a city where the expenses are extremely high. We'd like to give him a substantial raise so that he will have enough money to buy him a motorcycle and be able to get around some. But that's Brother Philip in Gunter. Brother Samson preaches in Visakhapatnam, same story. He was sent to revive a congregation over in Visakhapatnam. He's presently working with about 4 congregations and just a tireless worker. Here are some of the orphan homes that we support. None of your funds are sent into the orphan work. But I like to tell about the orphan work that we do because of the amazing opportunities. You can go out onto the street and find an orphan and just bring him into the home. There's no government paperwork that needs to be done. You risk the problem of his family then later trying to come take the child back. But most of the time, these children do not even know who their parents are. This particular home in Chukapali, our house parents are Brother Jaya Kumar and his wife, I can't remember her first name, but he is a graduate of MSOP, and we started this orphan home. She was carrying her first child. This was something like 7 years ago. She was carrying her first child. We opened the home up, immediately brought 6 orphans into the home, and then she had a second child. So they have 2 children of their own and 6 children who are cared for in the orphan home. Here's an interesting thing about the orphan homes. All 3 of them that we support have been in existence for about 8 years, 7, 8 years. And as these children grow up, let's say we bring one in that is 13 years of age. And we see him all the way through high school, 5 or 6 years, and then we continue to support him with the family for 2 more years while he goes to a trade school. So that when he finishes that trade school, he's ushered out into society and he's useful and has a way to make some money. We also have an orphanage home at Goody Goodham. I think we have 4 children there, and then we also have one more that's actually in Kakinada, sort of a district of Kakinada that has 4 or 5 children. So we have about maybe a dozen orphans that we care for. Could be a few more than that. And if you would like to contribute to the orphan work, we'll see to it that the funds are sent there for medical supplies or clothing or anything we need to do to help those orphans and help them care for the orphans. I made my first trip into Panama 2 years ago at the invitation of Brother Pablo Horna. He is a graduate of MSOP, and I met him when I was teaching in the school there. Of course, we're all familiar with Panama City and the massive population there, but he works in a place called Santiago, and he moved there the year that I moved, that I went to see him because the work was needing some help. And so this is the building there in Santiago, Panama. The gentleman in the center is the local preacher there. His name is Rolando. He is a tireless worker, knows a little bit of English. The gentleman on the left is Brother Pablo Horna, and Brother Jainier Montialto on your far right is a graduate of Brown Trail. He graduated in 2007 or 8, somewhere along in there. By the way, Scott, when he came to Brown Trail, he didn't speak a lick of English. He attended the Spanish classes, but in his off time, he'd go into the English classes because he wanted to learn English. Well, now he serves as an interpreter. He's one of the best interpreters I've come across, and he lives in Costa Rica. And so he'll travel to Mexico, Panama, wherever I go in Latin America. He said, I'll come there and be your interpreter. So he's a tremendous asset. We had a leadership class. These were some of the men who attended that leadership class. This is let me see if I can back this up. This is a picture of Brother Pablo interpreting for me in one of those classes. This is a group of the men who attended this leadership class. And I got to tell you about one gentleman here. He is this short fella. Right here, looks like he's in a denim jacket, about the fourth over. He owns a business, barely ekes out a living. He sells tamales on the street. And when he heard of this class, he closed his business up for a full week to attend this class. Now just think about what he sacrificed. A full week's worth of wages to attend this particular class. And so there were about 7, 8 men all together who attended the class. From there, we went back in 2023, and this time we did two things. I conducted a leadership class, and the ladies who went with me, who was my wife and her business partner, Tia McWhorter, they taught a Bible class teachers workshop. Just a couple of pictures here real quick of the Panama Canal area. No ship came through. The whole 2 hours we were there, we didn't see one ship pass through. Old streets of Panama looks like a lot of the ancient Mexican, Spanish style buildings. The lady on the far left is Pablo's wife. Her name is Christina. She interpreted for April and for Tia. You see all the displays on the wall. When we arrived in Santiago, they spent about maybe 6 hours setting this display up. And Sister Tia is on the right, but they go through each one of these and they teach the ladies how to use these visuals and actually instruct younger children. These were the ladies who attended the class, very well attended, young and old alike. These were the men who would attend the leadership class during the day. And so we had activities going from 9 o'clock in the morning till 7 o'clock at night. And we did that for 4 full days, but they were so appreciative and so enjoyed our labors. I'm also doing some work in Costa Rica. I'll just mention this briefly. I initially went to La Fortuna to help with some church problems. They are having some real issues with the feminist movement, and women actually taking over the congregations. So we went there to try to deal with it. We were not successful insofar as getting the ladies to repent, but we were successful in getting the faithful to quit staying there and approving of that. And so they started a strong congregation. And we're now known as the Three Amigos when we go to Costa Rica or Mexico or anywhere. Population in Costa Rica is 5,236,000. They're predominantly Catholic. There are about 50 to 75 congregations, and the average size of a congregation in Costa Rica is about 32. But the opportunities there, it is just incredible how receptive people are. You could stand on the corner outside a store and somebody walks by, hand them a tract, and they'll stop and start talking to you. And 9 times out of 10, you're going to set a study up and baptize those individuals. They're very open to the proclamation of the gospel. This is the congregation in Alajuela. This is close to San Jose. Brother Freddie, I can't remember his last name. He's a graduate of Brown Trail also. So Brown Trail is doing some great work among Spanish-speaking people. And I'll just give a plug for my old alma mater there. If you can help support particularly a Spanish student at the Brown Trail congregation, I would encourage you to look into that and get some information on it. A couple of pictures of the congregation. They have a nice facility. I had to tell you about this young lady on the right. That is my granddaughter. We picked her up at the airport on Friday. She spent 3 full days with us, working with the church, and then she had to go back to America to work. But she so enjoyed being there. Picture of me teaching in the worship. Brother Javier Montealto is with us, and like so many congregations, they love to eat when you get through. And so we had a fellowship, and the food was good. Some of it was a little bit spicy for me, but nevertheless, we enjoyed it. So those basically some of the works that we did. We crossed over the mountains into La Fortuna and Caseta to work there in the congregation where Hanier labors, and we were very successful in reaching out to some who were not members of the church. I'm watching the time, and I'm going to try to wind this up in the next 3 or 4 minutes. But I want to show you a picture of one family here that we studied with. And if this will cooperate, or I'm not holding it right, a few pictures, but this is a picture of the congregation. But this is a family right here. I'll show you the whole family here. The older gentleman on your far left that has the hat on, he's the father. He's not a Christian. His son, who is in the yellow shirt, I think that's his son. He is a Christian, and his wife is a Christian. His other son, his wife is a Christian, but he's not a Christian. And then they had a couple of others there. We had about 9 or 10 for this study, and I think we encouraged them. I think they're just this close to obeying the gospel. So keep that congregation in your prayers. And this is a family that none of these are members of the church. But mother, far right, who is predominantly Catholic and refused to even study. She said, I'll have nothing to do with it. She came to our fellowship and agreed to study. So you never know, the kindness of people and the way we behave towards people and the sight of people helps them to understand that we have something to offer. And so I left Costa Rica behind. I plan to go back to Panama this coming fall, and then I plan to go back to Costa Rica hopefully sometime early next spring. I do want to do one more thing, show you the address if I can get this to come up. I'm working in a unique situation. The funds that are used for the mission work are overseen by the Forest Hill congregation. You may want to check the battery on this later. This is just not advancing. But the Panama Street congregation oversees our personal support. If you would like to be involved in any of our mission works, I want to encourage you to send us some funds to Forest Hill Church of Christ and designate in the letter who it's for, because they handle about 8 or 10 mission accounts. And if you don't designate what it's for, it's going to go who knows where. So if you would like to contribute to that, it would be deeply appreciated. Panama Street, and here's the goal that we have. April and I have set the end of this decade to finish receiving personal support. She will be on Social Security, I will be on Social Security, and we will be able to support ourselves from there on, all other factors being equal. So we have a 5-year window, and if you can contribute to our support at the Panama Street congregation for part of that 5 years, a one-time contribution, it would go toward us meeting that particular goal. I know that's been fast, and I know that most of your interest is in India. I particularly want to ask you to pray for the Indian government. They are going through an election cycle right now. It is not looking good. It looks as if the Hindu Nationalist Party is going to get more control, and they're going to be even more stringent. And a lot of our American missionaries who are presently going to India are going to find themselves being challenged and unable to go into the country. So keep that country in your prayers, and keep the work in India in your prayers, as well as throughout the world. Thank you so much for your time. I appreciate you being here. And if you have any questions, I'll stay around for a few minutes. But I've got to hit the road because I had to be in Searcy, Arkansas by 5:30 this afternoon. So I've got a long drive ahead of me, and I can't stay real long.